They came for Rogan. I said nothing. They came for Chappelle. Still, I said nothing. All right, the other big news this week, Chris, Hedges canceled, obviously, the legend himself. Just going to open with a little Hedges clip here to give us some flavor to the conversation. This is one of the most iconic figures of the early internet. He's right up there with Chomsky, man, in terms of his influence.
Comrades lose their identities in wartime for the collective rush of a common cause, a common purpose. In comradeship, life is ecstatic and corporate, as opposed to friendship, where life is singular and individual. In comradeship, Gray reminds us, there are no demands on the self. This is part of its appeal, and one of the reasons we miss it and seek to recreate it. In wartime, when we feel threatened, we no longer face death alone, but as a group, and this makes death easier to bear. We ennoble self-sacrifice for the other, for the comrade. In short, we begin to worship death, and this is what the god of war demands from us.
So iconic, dude. Gosh. Just the voice of Hedges. I love it. He's more iconic than Parenti, probably.
Oh, for sure.
You think?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anything from Parenti in 15 years.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to him, man.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Hedges is still relevant today. You know, he's still showing up on different shows, writing books, publishing articles, giving his thoughts on the news of the day, and getting canceled, as it turns out.
Yeah. The great cancellation got Chris Hedges, man. They came for Rogan. I said nothing. They came for Chappelle. Still, I said nothing.
They came for J.K. Rowling, who was there, and now Chris Hedges.
Not Chris Hedges. They've gone too far. So in this clip, this is from War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning. This was his first big book tour that I can remember. Maybe there was another one prior, but this was his first one after the NYT fiasco. So in this clip, he's talking about, obviously, war, how war brings us meaning, and comradeship is one way that it does that. He's talking about how at wartime, we get this sense of comradeship that we're missing from society these days. We're isolated, we're atomized, as they call it. And there's something in us that comes out during war times that we crave, is his argument here. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, it's kind of this indelible part of human nature, and all too often that comradeship can be kind of co-opted by
football.
Football. I was going to say different political purposes. You can.
Oh, you mean like nationalism?
Nationalism, yes.
Very flowery language, though. I love the voice too, man.
Mm-hmm. He's certainly he's a fantastic speaker. He has his father was a preacher. I want to say a Southern Baptist preacher, and so I think he picked up a lot of the oratory skills from being around his father. And he reminds me a lot of I would say like the black pastor activists. The
Cornel West.
That's who I was thinking of. Killer Mike.
I believe
along those lines.
If I remember correctly, Hedges did go to seminary for a period.
I don't know if he did or not. I know his father actually had quite a few run-ins with the establishment of his church for teaching to gay people and women's issues. Basically, I guess taking the kind of progressive stands at the time against the church hierarchy.
Interesting. That makes sense. It gives some context to Hedges' position on things. So he was a war correspondent for the New York Times for over a decade, and he won the Pulitzer in 2002 for covering Al-Qaeda after 9/11. He appeared on Democracy Now! Many years ago. I'm not sure if you remember this, but he was booed at Rockford College in Rockford, Illinois, when he showed up for a graduation ceremony to give a send-off speech, and he launches into this anti-war speech during the invasion. They started booing him. They unplugged his mic several times. eventually, I think he did finish the speech. I'm not sure if he cut it short, but he eventually did finish it. And then the president of the college comes out and like apologizes to everybody. But I'm of two minds on this, because if you listen to the speech, on the one hand, these people are booing because they're American patriots and they want to kill brown people, right? But on the other hand, you got Chris Hedges going to a fucking graduation ceremony, trying to, doing a commencement, trying to celebrate. And he's doing the Chris Hedges thing where he's like, this is the worst time to be alive. Everything's gone to shit. We're looming closer to Armageddon. And I can understand a little anger there on, they're expecting some sort of jovial speech by this New York Times journalist. They got Chris Hedges. Probably not what they signed up for.
I don't know. It's an important message to get out.
It is, dude. Very important. I think he definitely did the right thing, for sure. I can actually play a little bit of this here. It's really bad video quality, but...
War is a fine diversion. War, for those who enter into combat, has a dark beauty, filled with the monstrous and the grotesque.
There's
the Bible calls it the lust of
background.
the eye.
The monstrous and the grotesque.
Against it. War gives us a distorted sense of self. It gives us meaning.
Can I say a few words?
Once in war, when I finish, the conflict obliterates the past and the future. All is one heady, intoxicating present. You feel every heartbeat in war. Colors are brighter. Your mind races ahead of it.
At this point, Chris Hedges gives...
Yeah, so Amy interrupts here because they unplug his mic right there. He gets it turned back on later and gives some more of the speech, but and he comments here about how the audience is much, much louder than you can hear on this recording because he has the mic, obviously. Yeah. So, and you can still hear him screaming like, go home, all this type of stuff, saying bad stuff to him. To Chris Hedges. What are they thinking, dude? If Chris Hedges came to my college to give a speech, I'd be overjoyed.
I mean, to be fair, how many of those people knew who Chris Hedges was at the time? He's never been a real big prominent German journalist.
I just think that at the time there was not too many people speaking out against the war.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you remember that time period, post 2001. The nation was really galvanized, and that lasted for quite a while up into the Iraq War in 2003. Probably 2004, 2005 is when you could finally, things kind of got back to normal, and that patriotism and nationalistic fervor started to die down. I actually haven't heard that though. I'm 100% Hedges, Team Hedges over here.
The war in Afghanistan passed with 98 yeses and 2 noes in the Senate.
Yeah,
that reflected the opinion at the time, the public consensus, basically.
Yeah.
God, Americans must be terrifying to the rest of the world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It didn't even have to be one of your people, because, of course, the hijackers weren't Afghans.
They were
Saudis, yeah. So
every brown person in the world is just like,
watch out. Yo, watch out.
After this Rockford College thing, he resigned from the New York Times because he was censored by the Times. They reprimanded him for this speech, and then he went to work for Truth Dig and some other places as a freelancer. He traveled through the Middle East and Latin America, he covered basically every war for, from the late 80s on. Eventually he had to give it up because he said he has PTSD now. He tells stories about having buddies die in his arms and shit.
I can imagine.
And currently his most recent project, he's been teaching in U.S. prisons. So yeah, Chris Hedges, absolute legend.
For sure.
I don't see Chomsky teaching any fucking prisons. Maybe he has. I don't know.
He probably has. So yeah, YouTube basically removed his entire archive of shows on Contact from their library, basically having to do with his affiliation with Russian news and RT. And
they didn't delete his channel. They deleted all of his On Contact episodes, right?
Yeah, removes the entire archive of the show On Contact from YouTube because of its association because it was funded by RT America and RT International. According to the journalist, social media platform took arbitrary action against him because it believed his show promoted pro-Russian content since it was aired on RT, which is an English language news network funded by the Kremlin and based out of Moscow.
Is that the whole statement? Have they said it was a mistake? They're going to put it back?
No,
or anything?
it was no. This is what has happened. This is their position on it, that it is Russian propaganda. It has been removed. Now, of that, Chris has pointed out, as have others, that much of the content on Contact has nothing to do with Russia, nothing to do with, certainly with Ukraine, any of this conflict. This is stuff dating back years. Most of it has to do with, most of it is just domestic politics stuff. So he's got interviews with Susan Sontag, Cornel West, the BDS movement in Israel.
Yeah, he's got Chomsky on there. He's got
Chomsky, yeah.
Abby Martin, people like that.
Abby Martin, Slavoj Žižek, I can't ever say his name. Slavoj Žižek.
Here's his statement on it. Let's play a statement on it first.
Okay.
What would you say to critics that say RT America, RT, was an outlet for Russian state propaganda, which is why it was targeted for removal by YouTube?
Well, to a certain extent, that's probably true. But are we better off not hearing what Russia has to say, not understanding why they think the way they do? I was a foreign correspondent for 20 years. My job was to be culturally, linguistically, historically, religiously literate, to step into the shoes of a Syrian or an Iraqi or a Palestinian, and of course I spent 6 years in Latin America and then later in Yugoslavia, and explain how the world looked from their vantage point, why they felt the way they did. And oftentimes the grievances they have are very legitimate. I certainly think that Putin's complaints about the expansion of NATO have a great deal of credibility. It's just a historical fact that the leaders of the West lied to Gorbachev, lied to Yeltsin, and lied to Putin. That's just historically true.
So this is the point Chomsky made on this. He basically said, sure, we know it's Russian state media, but that's no excuse to cancel it, right?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I mean, this kind of goes hand in hand, actually, with what we were talking about earlier about this the fervor that gets built up. At the time, the fervor that got built up around the Iraq or the Afghan war and the Iraq war, and his kind of being canceled for the same reasons. Then, this overreaction, this overcorrection to a perceived threat. At the time back then, anybody that was against meting out justice to those evil Afghanis that attacked us on 9/11 was somebody that became a kind of persona non grata in the U.S. and had to be taken out of the public discourse. And that's part of what's happening now, certainly with the Russia-Ukraine thing. I used to watch RT. RT does a lot of great work. I haven't watched them in a few years, to be fair, but there's some excellent journalism done on there. I'm sure that anything having to do with Russia is a little sus, but certainly as far as RT America goes, you had like Abby Martin on there. She was great. She did a lot of excellent work. Things having to do with any coverage having to do with domestic issues or even foreign issues in most other countries was excellent journalism as far as I'm concerned. But we have this proclivity in the U.S. to take people out of the public discourse, and it's just another example of it. I think it's kind of runs hand in hand. So when I heard about this, I was thinking about you, and I was thinking about some of the statements you made in reference to Rogan at the time, or a month or so ago, when we talked about Rogan potentially getting canceled. And my take was that you were kind of dismissive of it because you didn't feel like, well, he's not really getting canceled. He still has a platform. He still has a voice. He can get this out. And so I wanted to ask you how you feel about the Hedges incident. Kind of in light and looking at it through the same prism as the Rogan incident or the Chappelle incident, for example. Chris Hedges is not going to lose his platform. He's very wealthy. He's going to be fine, and people are still going to listen to him. Whenever he says something. So, is this something we should worry about? Him having a couple shows taken off YouTube?
Well, I think the Chappelle comparison doesn't work because Chappelle didn't lose anything. He just faced some minor criticism. Rogan had some of his videos, some of his old podcasts deleted off of Spotify, so that's maybe comparable here. I think the difference, though, is Rogan was spreading misinformation. Of course, the episodes they took down weren't really related to that, though, so I guess that argument doesn't apply.
Yeah, so even I always get wary when we start judging these things based on our subjective analysis of the quality of the information being put out there. I would probably agree with you. In most instances, on how we would analyze the quality of the information. You know, I think I agree with you on a lot of things, but you know, our subjective analysis of it still is our subjective analysis, and it just seems to be a really, I don't know, I guess a really slippery slope to start going down.
So you're bringing up the age-old argument that, you know, about censorship in general, which is free speech absolutism. This is Chomsky's position. This is Hedges' position. I'm more ambivalent on it. I could be pushed either way on this. I really have two minds about it. On the one hand, I get the argument. The argument that Chomsky makes is that if you let censorship happen, it's going to happen to us. This is probably what's going on here with Chris Hedges, in my opinion. At the same time, I get so fucking pissed at people like Tucker Carlson. He's number one on cable news. Ben Shapiro's show, number one on Facebook. Is that okay? I mean, they're lying constantly. Chris Hedges isn't lying. Chris Hedges just has an unpopular opinion. There seems to be a fundamental difference between somebody spreading factual information that you disagree with and somebody spreading false information. There seems to be a difference there. I could be swayed on this point, though. Like I said, I'm the whole free speech absolutism thing. It's like, do you let, like, for example, Germany has laws against Nazism. Yeah. Should we repeal those laws? Is that a good idea? I have no problem in theory with, obviously we keep the unpopular opinions and we get rid of the untrue opinions. But I think the problem, and this is what you were just saying, Chomsky says, is like, functionally, how does that work? You know, right.
Who sits there, who goes through and is going to analyze these different statements and pick which one and what criteria do they use? You know, if it were you sitting in a room, I would trust you for the most part to do that, but it's not. It's going to be, you know, some appointed people. So I think, somebody appointed by some bureaucrat. So just as a matter of pragmatism, it's almost kind of, I feel like it's kind of necessary that everybody's voice gets heard, whether they're Brett Weinstein telling people that ivermectin is 100% effective as a prophylactic, or Chris Hedges railing against U.S. imperialism. Just, it's the only way for it to function is just to have it all out there.
But the problem is the deck is stacked against the truth. The capital interests are aligned in their messaging, and they have so much power because of the way the system is set up. And we could change the system, that'd be ideal, and then I would be on board with you. Your speech is equivalent to how much wealth you have behind that speech, and you have such a larger megaphone.
Yeah. Like you said, though, the decibel level of your speech is directly correlated with the amount of money you have behind you. And once we start going down that road where misinformation starts getting, obviously, and it's not really being censored. This isn't a government stepping in and saying this can't be said. This person's going to face some sort of consequences for saying X, Y, or Z. These are companies making a business choice to not give platform to certain people. My fear, I think, and I'm sure your fear too, is like if we start going down that road, that disproportionate level of influence could just be exacerbated. You know, it might not get leveled off by curbing certain speech. It could just be exacerbated. And, now we have oil companies who have infinite wealth, getting their speech heard a little bit more and maybe suppressing some of the claims of climate activists. And this hasn't been wholly demonstrated that temperature's rising by X degrees. So we're going to call this misinformation, and we're just going to use these controls that are already in place to dampen this speech.
It sounds like we agree that the people who shouldn't be deciding this stuff are the CEOs of these corporations, right?
Yes, 100%.
So Hedges also argues, I'm not sure if he explicitly argues this or just implies it, I'm not sure, but RT and all this content is not anti-American, but anti-American imperialism. All these guests you have on here, they're all left-wingers, and did this play into YouTube's decision to pull all this stuff down, is the question. Right? There's two things here that benefit YouTube. For one, they benefit from the posturing of anti-Russian sentiment in the country. They're benefiting that way, cashing in on people's outrage over the invasion. And for two, they're able to take down a bunch of left-wing shit.
I don't buy into the kind of concerted right-wing efforts or right-wing intentionality behind the big tech platforms as much as you do, certainly over issues like this. Now, if it were issues that more directly affected their business model, I might get on board with it, but I don't think, I imagine that the people at YouTube and YouTube in general doesn't care much about if Chris Hedges talks to Abby Martin and she, or the BDS, if you have a BDS activist on there, pointing out Israeli war crimes. I don't think that they would care about that.
I think you underestimate, for one, the power of the Israelis in the United States corporate system. I think they're pretty entrenched there. We already know that from all the laws. We have BDS, anti-BDS laws all across the country. For one. For two, it's not, this could have came down from the freaking board. You're telling me that the board of directors of Google isn't interested in capital interests, promoting their ideology or suppressing, for example, union organizing? I'd be very surprised if that were true.
There's not the clear connection that I could see with like big retailers like Walmart or the oil industry. It's a lot more apparent, the connection between their interests and their lobbying. And, of course, a lot of these people also kind of personalities in and of themselves. So we know that they, donate to certain right-wing causes. Whereas Google, I mean, maybe it is posturing. It's been effective, I would say, because I certainly view them this way as slightly leaning left, if not, at the very least, kind of apolitical.
Left by what standards?
Well, I mean, I don't know. These are just kind of my prejudices about them. But I see a lot of these tech people as being people our age. They live in San Francisco, for God's sake.
Elon Musk is our age.
They've got to be fucking hippies.
Definitely outrageous. Don't fuck with legends. Here is Chris Hedges schooling Christopher Hitchens. Because he's a boss.
Oh, I remember watching this debate.
Really?
Yeah, I liked Chris Hedges up until this one. Hitch or die, baby. It's my boy.
Hitch had some questionable positions at times.
It's always, in every case, devoted to the subjugation of women. The Orthodox Jew has to begin the daily prayer. Thank God for not making me a woman or a goy. That's how much they think of women. Somebody has to buy retail, as was once said of the Goyish. Everybody knows what Islam says and mandates for women. Everybody knows also what St. Paul said about women. Everybody knows, even those who, probably there's some here who think maybe I have a Buddhist option here, has to notice that even Buddha is born from a slit in his mother's side. Anything but the filth and disgust of having to contemplate the female reproductive system. What could be more obviously man-made than this, and made in a barbaric period, even of the history of the male sex? It's plain as could be. The terror of menstrual blood, for example, the horror of it, the feeling of uncleanliness that attaches to everything female, that's before you start with every other manifestation of sexuality. Filthy, guilt-ridden, masochistic, horrible. Our emancipation from this is the condition of our emancipation under, it seems to me, any terms at all. Time is short for us to find this out.
Well, that gets to the notion that somehow, if you abolish religion, which has been part of every human society since human society has been recorded, these dark impulses are somehow going to vanish. If torturers, killers, sadists, and tyrants don't wrap themselves in the cloak of religion, they'll wrap themselves in the cloak of something else. Fascism, communism. I mean, these are, and I think as you correctly pointed out, bear many similarities to the kinds of ideological forms that we see within repressive religious institutions. The problem is not religion. The problem is the capacity we all have for evil, the capacity we all have for atrocity. And as long as we externalize evil, and that's of course what religious fundamentalists do, we can't guard against the ability and the seductiveness that all of us carry within ourselves.
Yeah, you ever want to see Hitchens getting handled? There he goes, right there, getting handled.
Oh, negative. So I would argue that, but I don't think that's what we're talking about. But the point is not that these bad impulses would go away, but they would lose some of their steam. It's one thing if you're doing something for nationalistic reasons or personal reasons, but that thing takes on a whole new level of importance if you're doing it because the creator of the universe commands you to do it, and you will spend an eternity in hellfire if you don't. That would be the point that Hitchens is making there.
I think Hedges has him to rights, though. I think he's exactly correct when he points out the fact that what Hitchens is doing, externalizing evil into the form of religion, is the same thing that religious people do, externalizing evil, in terms of Satan. And Hedges is just arguing that the evil is in all of us at all times. This is part of human nature. Blaming religion is the wrong approach in his view.
Yeah, certainly. I think. Well, what Hitchens would say, what I would say, is that the impulse is there regardless, but the context of religion makes it kind of infinitely worse. It takes something that's bad and makes it that much worse because it gives it a supernatural level of importance, whereas otherwise it would just be, any other ideology, any other thought process. Once you add eternal consequences, it makes things a lot more important, a lot more dire, a lot more stark.
Perhaps. So I have, I'm going to read Hedges' written statement about the Great Slap, see what Hedges has to say about that one. All right. We gaze upon a sea of faces with no regard for the human race and our place in it. Painted across the screen, we are greeted with smiles
and laughs and crying. A slight offense between sophisticated businessmen turns brutally violent with no warning. The human race watches rapt with horror and delight. They drink in the blood of anger and fear, seeking to only grasp that last fleeting emotion before it slips away once again. The condemnation that comes in response the next day will serve to boost the profits of the media companies who profit from the violence. At the end of the day, we will resume our tea party of smiles and respectability, all the while waiting for the true brutality of our nature to rise like a many-headed serpent and strike out again. It starts out like love, but it is death. Public slapping is the beautiful young nymph in the fairy tales that when kissed exhales the vapor of the underworld.
Thank you.
Dear Lord, what a beautiful, what a beautiful statement. How eloquent and how evocative.
Yeah, it sounded just like Hedges.